Alright guys, we got a 1987 Briggs Stratton 8 horsepower, model 19. Y'all seen this engine one other time in a video probably about 3 years ago when I bought 3 engines off a guy, and this was one of them. Had it running. This was the only time I ever had it running, but I could hear a knocking sound, which I'm pretty sure was a rod knock, and it was smoking every time I give it gas. So I've always wanted to rebuild it, and finally got the extra time. I've had the parts on hand forever. I got quite a few 8 horsepower parts to rebuild them. First thing we want to work on this is, for some reason, the oil drain plugs have been cut off, like on both sides. Like, I don't know why somebody would do that. So hopefully there's enough there where I can get like a pipe wrench on it to get them to start coming loose. If not, maybe I can use like a hammer and punch or a chisel and work it. Worst case is having to weld a nut on it. So we'll just see what happens. And this carburetor was leaking gas out of it, but I have this carburetor assembly off of the 8 horsepower that flipped when it blew up. If you remember that, there's a video on that. So I can take everything off of this and put on this, because I knew this was a good carburetor because the engine was running good. But I'll change out this elbow just to keep this original. But we'll change that carburetor and rebuild it eventually. So that's where we're at, and it's not going to be a step by step. So let me come up with a solution for the oil drain plugs and go from there. Okay, so I was able to take a punch, kind of pound it in like this, and go at an angle. Ended up going from the side of it like this, and finally got it to start turning. Was able to get a pipe wrench on it, so now we can get the oil draining. So the oil's clean in it, like it looks like brand new oil. So before I drain it out, I think about pulling the cylinder head off and just see what's going on, to see what kind of shape the cylinder's in. I need to check to see if it's cast iron sleeve or aluminum bore anyway. This engine's been apart before. It's got gasket maker on here, so maybe it's been rebuilt and it just wasn't broken in yet while it was smoking a little bit. I mean, you never know. So let's just pull the head off and kind of look around a little bit. The cylinder don't look the best, but it's, I've seen worse, and there's not an extreme amount of carbon buildup. I mean, it's a decent amount, but I don't really see nothing real bad. Usually at the cylinder bore, you can move the piston a lot. The valves are still pretty tight. It's a normal amount of play. But I found this. It fell apart, and I took the flywheel shroud off. There wasn't no screws put in this. So maybe the clanging sound was just this bouncing around. So I'm going to put this back together, pop the head back on it, and we're going to get it running again just to see what it does. Alright, so I did a couple things off camera. I changed the oil plugs out, and I only did one because I only got one on hand. And that's the main side of change oil from on these, so it's just easier to get to. I put the carburetor on here. I didn't put the air filter on stuff on there until I get it running, because this air filter is pretty nasty, so I might have to try to find another one. I don't have the right linkage, so for right now I just hooked it up to the spring on there and just ran it up to there for right now. Put the original muffler back in. We're pretty much ready to test. I just tested for spark. Got a good spark. You can see the long screws I put in on that. So now it's catching every single time. It is missing the screen right there. It's not that big of a deal. Yeah, get the motor bolted down. It's only the second time the test frame's ever been used. Alright, so we got the gas on. It's the first time the gas tank on this thing's been used. So this thing's either going to start right up or not want to start at all. So let's just see what happens. Yeah, it's promising. Alright, so definitely a good running engine, but it does need rebuild. You can see, anytime you throttle up and you see a puff of smoke, that's always rings, just a given. And not so much when it's idling, but when you're giving it throttle, you can smell the oil burn in the exhaust. Not super bad, but it's definitely time for a freshen up in it. And it's also leaking oil out of the crankshaft seal here, as you can tell. So it just needs freshened up. So let's get it all apart and kind of look at it. I'm not going to bore you with the teardown. I might put it on time lapse, but we'll see. Alright, so it's all tore down. Everything seems to be in really good shape, and it's had some valve work done at some point. You see the intake valve's been lapped in. The exhaust valve don't look like it has been. I got the top compression ring in. You can see a pretty large gap there, so that's the culprit for the smoke, which I figured. A little bit of scoring on the piston. May or may not change pistons. We'll just have to see. The cylinder's got some scratching too. Nothing major. Even though it's an aluminum bore, I might hit it with the hone just to kind of smooth it just a little bit and go from there. Then I'm going to pressure wash it and clean everything. We might as well just go for a full-on cleanup and paint and everything. We're going to do it. I'm not liking this cylinder, guys. I got a new ring in the top here and really closed up the gap. I'll make it at some point. I just wanted to kind of take a look at it, and so definitely the new rings alone will help definitely. But that's pretty heavy scoring. There's only so much I can do about it. My boring hone won't go up to this bore size, and I don't have the oversized piston and stuff on stock anyway. Like I said, it ran good, and there wasn't no piston slap, so we'll probably end up just going with it. Like, I've seen much worse than this before, and then the new rings will wear it in, and it'll should be all right. I would say. It wasn't like it was smoking like a freight train either, so I've seen bores worse than this and not smoke a bit, so we're just going to have to take a chance on this one, guys, because that's all I can do. I honed it one more time, and it seemed like it helped a little bit. At least the edges are kind of rounded now, so hopefully that'll help the ring seal. About all I can do with it. That's why I don't like the aluminum bore engines. There's not as much as you can do with them. I'm going to level the deck and the cylinder head as well. I'm not going to show it on camera. You've seen me do it before. There's a video just on that if you need information on that. It makes a good true seal, so you don't have to worry about the head gasket leaking. And also bump up the compression just a little bit. I mentioned it before, but I always like to remind myself and other people, don't get your valve tappets mixed up. Put them in order as they come out. Like I got the exhaust valve here and the intake one over there. They're identical, but the reason you don't want to mix them up is they could be worn in differently. Even if it's just off 2 or 3 thousandths of an inch, it's going to mess with your valve clearance. So you always want to get them back that way. At least everything will be the same as it was. And you got to, foul the valve stems to adjust the clearance. So just a little tip. All right, so I pressure washed all the parts, or the block, the head, and the oil sump, and put the new rings on the piston. Sorry, I'm not going into a whole lot of detail on this. I wish I could have another piston to replace this with. I did dress it up just a little bit, and I think it'll be alright. Another shot of the cylinder bore. I need to wipe it out before I drop the piston in. Just installed a new oil seal on the flywheel side. That's the new one for the PTO side. I popped the bearing off of the crankshaft. The way I had to do it, probably not the best way. I had to get a chisel to start here and start pressing it out that way. and once it started moving, it came right off. And I sanded that down before. It don't look like it, but better than it was. I also had to dress this down because the flywheel was stuck on there really good, and my rubber mallet broke in the middle of it. I'm going to put you on time lapse again, putting this back together just to speed up the video. And if you need a more detailed video when rebuilding the engine, more step by step, I have several other ones, maybe not this particular engine, but most small engines are very similar, especially these old flatheads. So I just put the valves back in. I put the springs in off camera. When I was setting the valve clearance here, I don't know if anybody noticed, but I had the valves in the wrong ports, and set the clearance for the intake valve and the exhaust valve. So now we got a little excessive gap on the intake valve. It's at like 8 thousandths, and it's supposed to be like a 5 to 7. So I mean we're close. It's close. And this is right at 10, maybe 11 on the exhaust valve. So we're good on that. I put the flywheel back on just so I could spin it over a little bit, because I've seen this one spot over here, and I think it's just oil that's coming out of one of the ring grooves, one of the ring gaps. So I don't think it's too big of a deal, because it's not leaving a score and it'll wipe right off. So I don't think that's an issue. Anytime you rebuild one of these aluminum bore engines, you always get a lot of metal in the oil on the first change and after it's broke in, because it's aluminum bore, so it's going to wear in, especially since I honed it. So we'll get it around for about 10 or 15 minutes and change the oil out in it. And you got to do that a couple times to get the oil out until it seats in, to get the metal out until it seats in. So that's about all you can do with it. I'm going to put the valve cover on, and I got to find a gasket because I see the one tore that came off. Yep. So we got to get a gasket. So not that big of a deal. This kit that I'm working out of don't have that because I rebuilt another engine out of it. I'm just trying to use a few things out of it. Well, I'm pretty much ready to paint it. Just got this pipe stuck in to use as a handle. Put grease and a rag on there to keep any paint from sticking on where the intake bolt's on there. Mask that off, even though it was overspray from where someone had painted this engine before. Yeah, the sun came out. It's helping me dry the paint a little faster here. So got 2 coats on there plus a tack coat. So it turned out pretty good so far. I'm probably going to leave it at that. 2 coats should be fine. Use about half a can of VHT high gloss engine paint. So it's good for 500 degrees and chemical resistant too. And I got the muffler sitting over here. I used the silver high heat grill paint on it, and I don't usually like to paint mufflers silver. I usually go for black, but I wanted to stand out from the black engine. There's another 5 horsepower we're going to get out and get going again one of these days. Never heard it run. Actually, I poured gas in it and it ran on that, but I don't know if it smokes or anything. And I got a couple other older engines here we're going to have to work on one of these days. Alright, so here it is, all painted. And I took all the masking tape off of it. Turned out pretty good. Not the best, but you know, good enough for what it is. I thought I had the round sticker that goes here, but I can't find one. This was overspray, was already there from where it was painted before. You probably already seen that. Alright, so I went ahead and put the carburetor muffler on and hooked the spring up on the throttle just for right now. And went ahead and put oil in it. 8 horsepower Model 19 flathead, holds 44 ounces of oil. I just put some Rotella 10W30 in it for the break-in. Then once I get it running real good and everything, we'll drain it out and put 30 weight out. Valvoline SAE 30. I ain't put the air filter on it yet because I know I'll probably have to adjust the carburetor and stuff anyway. And I cleaned the air filter out and it's still drying. Alright, so it's bolted down to the stand. Fuel hooked up. I ain't turned it on yet. Get ready to try to start here in just a little bit. It'll probably smoke a little bit first because of the oil on the piston and everything. Well, I think there's something wrong because it just won't quit smoking. Like it slowed down a little bit. And so I got the oil draining out of it. And, you know, there's no more metal in it than there normally would be after a rebuild, but something just don't seem right. So we're going to pull the head off and check everything. I pulled the head off and there's no more scoring than there was. So I'm kind of thinking there's probably maybe not a problem, other than that scoring on the cylinder and the piston. And it just needs a little more time to seat in because it was smoking less there towards the end, and it's got amazing compression. So I think we're just going to run it for a while and maybe try to get it on something, put it under load and see if it'll help, you know, seat it in. Alright, so that was with it run with the Valvoline SAE 30 in it. I ran just a slightly lower oil level than I did before. And I just feel like it was just a little too much that was in it. And it seemed like it really helped. And it just needs to break in more too. These aluminum bore engines sometimes take a little while to break in, where them chrome rings, you got to kind of resurface the cylinder walls. There's a decent amount of metal in the oil at first, but now, I'll make to show you. You can look and see that the oil still looks pretty clean. So that's a good sign there. If it's getting cloudy again from metal, then you got something probably wrong. So we'll call it a semi-successful rebuild. I'm just going to take time to get it broke in more, and I don't really know what this engine is going to be used for. I just wanted to rebuild it just to make a video on it, be something else off my list. So questions, comments, suggestions for similar videos, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one. But I'm going to put the air breather and everything back on just so you can see it real quick before the video ends. And there's what it looks like all back together. I think the muffler matches that air breather pretty good. I mean, obviously not a perfect match, but it gets the point across. Well, thanks for watching, and again, we'll catch you on the next one. And questions, comments, suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. So thanks for watching, guys.